What happens when a veteran with 40 years of service finds himself unwanted? When his family, the system, and his memories turn their backs on him? What happened on an empty city street put everything in its place, but not in the way you think. It had been raining for 3 days straight. Not a warm, gentle spring rain, but the kind that makes your nose run and your fingers go numb. Under the bridge at the corner of 8th and Broadway, the remnants of someone's life were soaking wet. Plastic, dirty bedding, a battered pot, and an old army jacket turned inside out as if it was no longer needed. Ray Decker stirred under the jacket, at first slowly, as if each movement had to be coordinated with his body separately. Then, with a dull exhalation, he sat up and covered his eyes with his hand. His forehead was wrinkled, his eyelids swollen, his lips cracked, and there was not a trace of pity in all of this. Only dry, familiar fatigue. He didn't talk to himself. He didn't curse. He didn't pray. He just knew the routine. He stood up. He stretched. His spine cracked like an old staircase. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand and put on his boots, one without laces, the other with a hole in the side where the logo used to be. He ran his fingers over his face. His stubble burned his skin like sandpaper. It would be nice to shave, but that was just wishful thinking. Around his neck was an old army dog tag. It rattled against his chest every time Ray walked. He used to take it off at night. Now, what was the point? The first steps were difficult. His old left knee clicked like an unrepaired door. His spine reminded him of itself with a nagging pain. But he walked on, like a soldier who couldn't afford to lie down. Not because he was a hero, but because if he lay down, he wouldn't be able to get up. He walked 3 blocks to the diner where every morning someone threw out unsold bread. Today was Monday, which meant they were closed. The trash can was empty. Ray wasn't surprised. He just kept walking. Nothing clicked inside him. He hadn't had an appetite since Saturday evening. His stomach had long since ceased to be a source of desire, but rather a mechanism that occasionally turned on to remind him that he was still alive. He turned onto Allen Street, walked past a shop window displaying laptops, and turned toward a building with a sign that read, Raybridge Facilities, Technical Staff, Cleaning, Security, Job Openings. Same sign, same door. Same girl at the reception desk. Young, wearing a sweater with deer on it, buried in her phone as if it were armor. "Good morning, ma'am. I'd like to try again." Ray's voice was even. No pleading, but no hope either. The girl didn't look up. "Your last name?" "Decker. Ray Decker." She looked at something on the screen. Shrugged. "You've already been called. You're not right for the job. We don't have any openings. I can sweep, mop floors, work weekends. I just need to start. I've worked with equipment, with people. I'm sorry. Next." He nodded, calmly. He didn't argue. Everything was as usual. It was a ritual, humiliating but not defeat. On his way out, he took a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. His resume, a crumpled printout on which you could still read, 40 years of service, honorary retired, commander of an engineering unit. Experience in logistics, supply, and operations coordination. Responsible. No criminal record. No bad habits. Ready to work immediately. The sheet was slightly damp. Ray folded it neatly and put it back. He didn't throw it away. It wasn't a resume. It was a reminder that he wasn't completely worthless. The asphalt on 8th Street was steaming like an old frying pan. Even in the rain, it smelled of burnt oil, wet cardboard, and something sour. The neighborhood had never been decent, but it had a rhythm. People bustled about, argued, shouted into their phones, dragged trash bags, and everyone was going somewhere, except him. Ray turned toward the construction site where he had looked for work a week ago. The same men in hard hats were still there, loading boards into a van. One of them, a tall man with a tattoo on his neck, noticed him and spoke first. "Hey, Grandpa, back for handouts?" Ray approached calmly. His voice didn't tremble. "I'm looking for work. Any work. I can dig, carry, lift, sweep. Didn't you lose a guy yesterday? The man grinned, glanced at his partner, and said, We take people who aren't falling apart. How old are you? I'm 68. Then you belong in a museum, not on a construction site. And again that laugh. There was no malice in it, only indifference, as if you weren't a person, but a statistic, a broken tool in a warehouse. Ray stood there for a second, then he nodded. Good luck, guys. He turned and walked away, not quickly, with dignity, even if his legs were buckling. Then he just walked on, without a destination, just so he wouldn't have to stand still. Standing still meant starting to think, and thinking was dangerous. He walked past a playground where 3 teenagers, about 10 years old, were jumping in a puddle. One of them threw a ball, and it bounced off the asphalt and rolled straight toward Ray. He caught it with his foot, bent down, picked it up, and handed it to the boy. He smiled. Here you go. Nice throw. The boy took the ball without looking and quickly ran away. Thanks, he muttered, and then whispered to his friend, He's a bum. He stinks like a garbage can. Laughter. Sincere. Not malicious. Just childish. Ray didn't look back, but at that moment his heart sank somewhere deep inside him, like an empty flask. He remembered how his son, when he was just a little boy, used to play with a ball. Only then, Ray would catch the ball, throw it back, and pick it up. And now he was in the place of those he had taught his son to treat with respect. He sat down on a bench at the bus stop. Not to go anywhere, just to sit. The rain began to drizzle again, listlessly, without ambition. A man in a suit walked by, closing his umbrella against the drops. He didn't even look, as if Ray didn't exist. As if he were part of the city furniture, the bench, the asphalt, the trash can. He ran his hand over his face. His skin was dry, his eyes stung. Strangely, old age didn't come in the mirror. It came in moments like this. When people looked away from you. The library on Huntington Avenue was one of those places that smelled of damp carpet and the warm plastic of old computers. It was always quiet, almost sterile. People sat at a distance, some with tablets, some with books, some just charging their phones and pretending to read. No one spoke to anyone else, only silence and the rustling of pages. Ray came here almost every day, not for the books. It was because of the chair by the radiator, because of the warmth, because of the power outlet. He sat in the corner, as always. Next to him was an old, worn backpack, from which he carefully, with both hands, like a priest taking out a Bible, removed an item that was now more precious to him than any insurance policy. A photo album. The cover was blue, the edge torn. There was a coffee stain on it, like a trace of someone else's life. He opened it slowly, as if someone might forbid him. The first page was a black and white photograph. A 20-year-old guy in a helmet, with a broad, silly smile under the scorching sun. Handwritten caption, Saigon, first month. He looked at that face as if it belonged to a stranger. There was confidence in those eyes, anger, youth. Something that was now gone, even in his memories. Next were photos from training, congratulations, diplomas, then a wedding photo. Lauren in a simple dress, holding flowers, her face looking like a miracle at the time. He remembered how she laughed that day. Her laughter was clear, like a bell. He turned the page. There was Eddie. Small, big-eared, dressed in a baseball uniform. His first victory in a school tournament, then his graduation, then nothing. The pages after that were blank. Not because there were no photos, but because there was no more life worth remembering. Someone sneezed nearby. Ray looked up. An elderly woman had moved away. He wasn't offended. He was used to it. He closed the album, put it back, and took out another sheet. His resume, no longer crumpled but torn. He had tried to make a new copy, but the printer in the library was jammed, and instead of clear text, it spit out gibberish. He didn't have money for another printout, and there was no point. No one read it. He pressed a button on his old phone, his only contact. Eddie. Call? Don't call? He dialed. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from memories. 3 rings. 5. Then a voice. Hi, it's Eddie. Leave a message if it's important. Pause. Ray didn't say a word. He just listened to the answering machine fall silent. Then he hung up. He left the library in the late afternoon. The rain had eased, but the wind had picked up. The same wind that blew up his collar and tugged at his ears like a reproachful old woman. Ray knew he had nowhere to go, but he walked anyway. Not because he knew the route, but because otherwise he would start thinking. He turned behind the supermarket where he used to work as a security guard. There was a loader he knew from last year. He nodded to him. Ray nodded back. No words were necessary. They both knew that yesterday you were in uniform, and today you were on your own. Next, he went to a vacant lot behind the old station. He sat down on a rock. He looked into the darkness. And then it began. Not memories. Unpacking. It was as if everything he had been holding back for years had suddenly come pouring out. And there it was. No tears, no hysterics. Just a dry retelling of pain that no one listened to. After Lauren's funeral, there was silence. Not just in the house, but inside him. She was his anchor, that damn hang in there that whispers in the morning when you don't want to get up. After her, there was a crack, and then the pieces started falling out. Eddie left. First for school. Then for work. Then that fight. Stupid. But the last one. You traded your family for your orders, his son said then. And he replied like a fool. I protected you. My whole life. No one asked us to. And that was it. Since then, silence. Pride, as always, proved more important than conversation. His pension arrived less than he expected, because there was a technical error in the documents. They told him they would recalculate it. But 2 years passed, and still nothing. He went to the authorities. He called. Every time, a new manager, a new certificate, a new come back later. Work? He tried. First as a security guard, then a storekeeper, then a delivery man. Until one day he fell with a load on the 4th floor. His heart, his blood pressure, a momentary blackout, and no more work. Then came the debts, banks, late payments. And the worst part was when they called you 100 times a day and said, you owe us, as if you were some kind of crook. But you're just an old man who did everything by the book. 6 months later, the bank took the house. They just came, changed the locks, and put a notice on the door. He didn't argue. He didn't even swear. He just sat down on the sidewalk with a backpack, and he realized, that's it. And now he was sitting on the cold stone behind the supermarket telling himself this, because no one else needed to hear it. He wiped his face, not from tears, from rain, or maybe from shame. Although, to be honest, the shame had long since burned away like old letters. The next morning it was especially cold under the bridge. The biting wind blew old plastic bags and a candy wrapper with the words, "Happy Holiday, Dad," faded like everything else. Ray woke up because his back was numb. More precisely, he hadn't been sleeping. He had just been lying there until he got tired of staring at the black void under the concrete ceiling. He left as usual. He didn't hurry. His back ached. His legs buzzed. He walked not because he had to, but so as not to freeze, not to go numb, not to become a permanent part of the street scene. Where there used to be free water, there was now a vending machine. Only this one was paid. He stared at it for a minute. Then he turned away. He walked past a small, cozy cafe called Amelia's Bakery. It smelled of cinnamon and bread. He didn't go to places like that anymore. Everything there was too lively, and he was just background noise. But this time he stopped. Not because he was hoping for a miracle, but because he was tired. He sat down on the curb just to catch his breath. And at that moment, a woman slowed down beside him. She was short, about 60 years old, wearing a bright red jacket with a bun of gray hair tied tightly at the back of her head. She was walking quickly but suddenly stopped. She looked at Ray. She looked him over, not with disgust, but with something more like recognition. Are you all right? He looked up at her. For the first time in a long time, he looked her in the eyes. I'm fine, ma'am. Just a little tired. She silently placed a paper bag next to him. Here's a sandwich and coffee. Hot. Just be careful. He wanted to say something, to explain, to refuse, or, on the contrary, to thank her in a way that meant more than just words. But his throat tightened. All he could say was, "Thank you." She nodded, without a smile, just nodded, and left, as if she hadn't done anything special. And he stayed, with the bag in his hands, with hands that were shaking not from the cold but from something else. He took out the sandwich. Simple. Bread, cheese, a little greenery. It smelled like home. He ate slowly, as if he was afraid to finish. The coffee burned his lips, and there was a strange, vivid pain in it. He felt his eyes burning. From the steam? From the bitterness? He didn't know, but it was real. And that, damn it, doesn't happen every day. Ray didn't sleep that night. Not because it was noisy. Not because it was cold. There was just too much going on in his head, and it was all silent. Fragments of memories played over and over like a broken tape. He was lying under the same bridge, but now it felt different inside. Something had cracked. Or maybe it had thawed. He remembered Lauren, how she stroked his sleeve when he left on a business trip, how she always left a note in his backpack, short, but with that same tone. Come back, I'll be waiting. He didn't always reply, but he always kept them. Then there was Eddie. He was 6 when Ray left for the East. When he returned, his son was already speaking in unfamiliar phrases. Are you leaving again? He asked once, with a bitterness that was unchildlike. At the time, Ray didn't understand how serious it was. Now, he did. It was too late. It didn't matter anymore that he provided for them, that he brought them gifts, that he was on duty. What mattered was that he was often absent, especially when he just needed to sit there. He rolled onto his side. The stones under his shoulder blade were damp. He didn't complain. He just kept quiet, because complaining is when someone listens. Towards morning, when the sky turned gray, he headed downtown. Just like that, without a goal. There was no point in going to a cafe or to work. No one was waiting for him. He just walked, to keep from going crazy. He stopped at a bank window, not because he saw anything, but because he accidentally caught his reflection. An old man, stooped, a veteran with no flag or medals, just a backpack and a couple of crumpled papers. He looked at himself, for a long time, as if he were a stranger. And suddenly there was movement in the reflection. A man in uniform, young, with a backpack, a patch on his shoulder. Behind him, a woman and a boy. They were smiling. They laugh. The man walks with a confident stride, his boots shiny, his posture straight. He leaves the bank and adjusts his belt. Suddenly he notices Ray. For a split second their eyes meet. The young man slows down. There is something between respect and uncertainty in his eyes. But he walks on by. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't nod. He just keeps walking. Ray stands there, like a monument that no one lays flowers on. He's not offended. No. He used to walk past people like that himself. He would sit at the bus stop, waiting for the bus. Just because there was a shelter, a bench, and no one was chasing him. Students, couriers, and grandmothers with bags passed by. Sometimes someone looked, but more often than not, they didn't. And then he heard a familiar voice. Ray, is that you, damn it? He turned his head. Harvey was standing in front of him. Old Sergeant Harvey. Once upon a time, they dug trenches in the desert together, shared dry rations, and dreamed of who would retire first. Harvey was a little shorter, a little broader, but his voice was the same, commanding with a hoarseness. "Harvey?" Ray couldn't believe it. Not at first. "You look like a bulldozer ran over you. What are you doing here? Did you get kicked out of your place?" Ray shrugged, calmly. No drama. "It's a long story." "Great. Tell me in the car." "Let's go." "Where?" "To my place. Sandra and I have a house. There's a guest room. You can stay for a month if you want." "I won't kick you out." Ray looked at him silently. Everything was fighting inside him. Bitterness, pride, loneliness. They were locked in a dogfight. He wanted to say yes, but the words wouldn't come out. Harvey didn't push him. He just stood there. And that was what set him apart from the others. He didn't pity him. He saw Ray as a human being. Not as a statistic, not as a problem, but as an old fighter. "Okay," Ray said. "Just for a day, to warm up. Stay as long as you need to." "Let's go." The car smelled of tobacco and mint candy. Ray got into the passenger seat as if it were an armored personnel carrier. He was silent. He stared out the window. It was as if he wasn't driving through a city, but through memories he was passing too quickly. He didn't know what he was feeling. Joy? Fear? Shame? Probably all of it at once. Or maybe none of it. Harvey's house stood on the outskirts of town, a single-story structure with a wooden porch and a "Beware of Dog" sign, although there was no dog in sight. In the yard lay tires, a rusty barbecue grill, and a pair of plastic chairs, warped from age. For Ray, it was a palace. After his daily grind under the bridges, it was almost West Point. Sandra greeted him on the porch, plump, with a kind face, wearing a housecoat. She didn't gasp or wail or ask, "What happened to you?" She just nodded, as if he came home every evening. "Are you hungry, Ray?" "A little." "Then get undressed and come to the table. Don't you dare refuse or you'll get a slap." He smiled. Almost for real. He took off his jacket, heavy and damp, as if it had been dragging him down for the last few years. He left it in the hallway. He followed Harvey. The kitchen smelled of stewed beef, onions, and bread. There were 3 plates on the table, and napkins, normal, cloth ones. He ate slowly, like when you're a kid and you have a mom and you know she's nearby. Only now Harvey and Sandra were nearby. And still, everything inside him felt tight. After dinner, Sandra said, "Go take a shower. There's a towel on the rack. Take whatever you find. Harvey's pajamas are too big for you, but they won't fall off." He nodded. The bathroom was small but clean. The tiles were old but warm. He took off his clothes. He glanced at himself in the mirror. His body was like a battle map. Scars, bruises, dents. He turned on the water. It was hot. It burned. And he stood there, as if he wanted to wash away not dirt, but years. After the shower, there was silence. He went into the living room. Harvey was sitting in an armchair watching a documentary about veterans on TV. Sandra had already gone to her bedroom. "Sit down," said Harvey. "Don't be afraid, I won't bite." Ray sank into the armchair. Opposite him was a wall covered with photographs. He stood up and walked over. The photo was of their company. He was young. Lauren was next to him. And Eddie, still just a boy, was smiling in front of the flag. Ray froze. The photo cut him like a knife. "I kept it," Harvey said. "You were my friend. You still are." "And I lost everyone." "No, you just gave too much of yourself to the service. And the service, brother, doesn't know how to give back." Ray didn't answer. He stood in front of that photo as if it were a grave. And suddenly he realized he couldn't stay. He left while the house was asleep. Quietly, like people who know that if they say, "I'm leaving," out loud, it will lead to unnecessary words, looks, and gestures. He didn't need thanks or persuasion. He just walked out into the night, in the same clothes, but with a clean face and a slightly drier heart. He paused on the porch for a second. He looked at the chairs in the yard, at the window where the nightlight was burning, at the doors behind which it was warm, and he left. The street was dark. The streetlights flickered like old lamps in barracks. He walked aimlessly. Again. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel cold. He returned to the bridge. The spot was taken. Some guy, skinny, young, was sleeping on his old mat. Ray didn't wake him. He just sat down next to him, leaning against the concrete pillar. He took a notebook out of his backpack. He had been carrying it around for a long time. It was empty. Not because he had nothing to say, he just didn't know who to say it to. Now he knew. A letter to his son. Not to send, just to say. His fingers wrote as if it were his last report. Eddie, I'm not writing to complain, or to ask for anything back. I'm writing because there's no one else. You were my only real fear, not a bullet, not death. It was the thought of losing you, not in battle, but in life. And I guess that's what happened. I'm not asking you to be proud of me. I'm asking you to remember who I was before everything fell apart. I'm sorry if I chose the wrong side. I really thought I was protecting you. I just didn't know how to be there for you, Dad. He finished. He looked at the lines. They were uneven, crooked, and trembling in places. He put the notebook back, not to pass it on, but to remember what he had said. He didn't cry, but this time he wanted to. It was dawn. The city was waking up lazily, with the coughing of buses, the clanging of carts, the rustling of plastic cups in the hands of morning pedestrians. It grew noisier under the bridge. People were going to work, taking their children to school, hurrying. And he sat there, with the same backpack, the same face, only with some new feeling inside. Not pain, not resentment. Something like, well, there, it's all out. At least to someone, at least on paper. He took the remains of yesterday's bread out of his backpack. It was hard. But still, it was food. He chewed slowly, without taste, just so his stomach wouldn't rumble. A teenager walked by, 15 years old. Hoodie, headphones, coffee cup in his hand. He slowed down for a second, looked back, took off his headphones, walked over. Hey, sir. His voice was young. No irony. Just one person to another. Ray looked up. Want some coffee? I just bought it. It's hot, with milk. He didn't know what to say. And that was the truth. Everything inside him tightened at how simple it sounded. No sarcasm, no pity, no drama. Why? Was all he could say. The guy shrugged, a little awkwardly. Because you seem to need it more than I do. I saw you give the ball to my friends yesterday. Thanks. He held out the cup. Ray took it. His hands were shaking again. He didn't know how to react. He just held the warm paper cup, like a medal. Only not from the government, but from a simple boy who simply saw him as a person. The boy had already walked away when Ray said, "Hey." He turned around. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sir." And he left. Ray remained seated. He drank his coffee. It was sweet, a little too sweet, with cinnamon, the kind he would never have ordered for himself. But now he drank it as if it were his salvation. And for the first time in a long time, the sky seemed a little brighter. Not because it was easier, but because he felt that somewhere in this damn world he still existed. Not as a veteran, not as a father, just as a human being. Ray's story is not about victory, nor is it about miracles. It's a story about how even if you've been written off, as long as you're alive, you can still be noticed. Even if it's just once. Even if it's by accident, but sometimes that's what saves you. If this story touched you, write the word respect in the comments. Because those who gave their lives in service don't need pity, they need to be remembered. And maybe this comment will be seen by someone who needs it most. If this story touched you, write the word respect in the comments, because those who gave their lives in service don't need pity. They need to be remembered. And maybe this comment will be seen by someone who needs it most.